The following is intended for mature audiences.
Hey boo, before we get into the episode, gosh, that was so stupid. Before we get into the ep, I received a rather creepy experience through DM that I went ahead and followed up on. Listen to this. When I was a kid, I hated sleeping in my room because I always thought there were people standing around my bed watching me. My mom would turn on the light and nothing would be there. Eventually, she gave me a flashlight and told me if I saw them again, I could turn the light on myself. I slept with that flashlight every night. I pretty much forgot about all of it until I was 17. I grew up on a farm in a small town in Ohio, and one weekend my parents and brother left town, so I had the house to myself. I always slept downstairs in the living room when I was alone. One night, while I was on the phone with my brother getting ready for bed, I pulled back the blankets and found a cut-up rabbit lying where I slept. I cleaned it up, tried not to freak out, and eventually went to bed. About an hour and a half later, I started hearing these insanely loud bangs coming from upstairs. They got louder and louder to the point where the kitchen lights were shaking. Then it suddenly stopped. As I was lying there, I got this weird image in my head of a woman in a white dress walking down the stairs. Right after that, the banging started again. I called my girlfriend, and while we were talking, she told me to go check it out. I had barely started going up the stairs when she suddenly said, "Get out of the house right now." I asked why. She said because I can hear the banging too. I ran out, got in my car, and went to a family friend's house. Later that night, their phone rang and nobody was there. Then someone started pounding on their front door. When they opened it, nobody was outside. The next day, we went back to my house and found almost every cabinet and door open. A few friends stayed over the next night because nobody believed me, and they ended up hearing the banging as well. Months later, a friend and I both heard what sounded exactly like my mom calling me downstairs. We even heard footsteps walking away from my room. The next morning, she told me she'd never called for me. Even after I moved away and joined the military, I still dealt with strange experiences, banging sounds, walking up feeling watched, and episodes of sleep paralysis. Looking back, I think some of it could probably be explained by night terrors, but still, I can't explain the rabbit, my girlfriend hearing the noises through the phone, or some of the things that happened in that house. And honestly, I'm still not sure where the nightmares ended and everything else began. So after I read this, I had some questions. Of course, my main concern here was what happened to the rabbit, right? And it turns out the rabbit was real and put in a plastic bag on the porch, which was then showed to a neighbor and their friends. I proceeded to ask if anyone involved ever talks about what they think all this was, like an actual haunting or sleep paralysis. They responded, "Honestly, it depends on who you ask. Some think I just freaked out, while others thought it was a spirit." My friend who spent the night definitely thought it was a ghost. Now, as a medical professional nurse, I think it's sleep paralysis. Now, I've read and have shared so many weird and unexplained experiences on this podcast, and while some I have personally had a hard time believing, others have genuinely creeped me out. And it's not my job here to invalidate anyone's experience, but the theory I would lean toward, I think the rabbit and the banging may have been real events, but I also think anxiety, lack of sleep, and fear alone could have amplified these later experiences, which made it difficult to kind of separate what was physically happening from what was happening in the mind. Regardless of what you believe is real or not, I will leave it up to you, but you can't deny this one sends a little shiver down my spine.
Welcome to a world where darkness and mystery converge. Navigate the depths of horror and true crime and join a society beyond the ordinary, where buzzworthy topics, paranormal tales, and listener-submitted experiences blend into a realm of the unknown. You have crossed into a place where the unusual and the terrifying are just the beginning. My name is Ralph Anthony, and welcome to the Scream Society podcast. Screamers.
Welcome into another edition of the Scream Society podcast, what I love to call a variety show from hell. In the dawn of being overworked and overstimulated, I hope we all are hanging on out there. I know I am. This episode, I'm joined by someone I would consider a day one on this podcast journey I've been on. He's an author, a fellow podcaster who is spreading queer knowledge on his podcast, A Jaded Gay, and just released his new book, Besties in Crime. Ghouls, girls, gays, and theys. Rob Loveless is here. Hello, Rob.
Hey, Ralph. Hey, everyone. I'm so glad to be back here. It's always so much fun when we record together.
How are things over on A Jaded Gay?
A little quiet, not going to lie. I took a little pause on the podcast piece of things just because I'm working a crazy job in grad school. So the burnout's real, but I've been turning all my podcast episodes into YouTube videos. So I am posting a couple videos a week, just kind of working through the backlog, but I'm hoping to be back this fall.
For those who are new, how would you describe the podcast to them?
So A Jaded Gay is kind of like a weekly dose of queer empowerment. I basically just go through episode topics about things that interest me about queer culture. Sometimes it's heavier stuff like shame. Sometimes it's lighter stuff like why your mustache is considered gay, or Kylie Minogue, who's my pop queen. And basically the whole thing is, we frame it around a tarot card, kind of do that as an affirmation for the episode, go through the topic itself, go through like the trauma, the hardships, but then leave it ending with an uplifting note. So I kind of created it because I know there are a lot of podcasts out there about queer health and queer mental health. Some of them felt very clinical though, which is really great, but I also want to create something that felt a little bit more accessible and kind of like talking about it with your best friend. So that's what I tried to do.
I love it. Now, aside from the podcast, you've also just recently put out Besties in Crime. How has that ride been, and what was the inspiration behind the story?
It's been so much fun with the book being out because I feel like some of the books I've wrote in the past, I try to be a little bit more serious about, but this one I didn't take it serious. So I just kind of let it be fun and queer and chaotic. And the backstory it is very loosely inspired by me and my real life best friend, Sarah. Definitely the friendship dynamics, the hardships the characters go through. And during the pandemic, we love true crime, and we were listening to a true crime podcast. And it was something about like beyond stupid crimes, or something that had to do with friends setting something on fire. And I was thinking to myself, I wonder if Sarah and I could get away with something like that. And then the plot for the novel hit me. So it's basically about two best friends who reconcile after being estranged. The one friend, Gia, she's going through a divorce and hasn't told anyone, and comes crying to her best friend, Jay. And he's still reeling from a breakup a year, prior. So they kind of work on building each other up, getting themselves back together. And they decide they want to go on vacation and they need some money. So they decide to rob her ex-husband, not soon to be ex-husband, even though her name's still on the mortgage. And in doing so, they accidentally burn down the house. It soon finds out that the husband's body is found in the wreckage, but it turns out he died of a gunshot wound. And right when that happens, these random guys show up at their hotel room demanding money. And it turns out that, I don't want to give the plot away, but basically somehow because of that, they get pulled into a mobster's plot. And then it's a lot of, banter, pop culture references, kind of like Schitt's Creek with True Lies vibes, I'd say.
That sounds juicy. So would you say that you and your bestie have gotten into, I wouldn't say to that extreme, like in the novel, but have you guys gotten into some trouble together?
Yeah, actually, some of the stories are in the book a little bit as they go through their memories. So one of them, way back when, the first time I visited my friend Sarah when she moved to Philly, we went out to a bar and I was slightly overserved, but fine. But we decided to walk outside because it was super crowded. And as we were walking, I tripped over somebody's leg and I, fell a little bit. And the bouncer chased us outside and told me that, I was out of there, kicked me out. And my friend's like 4'11", and she runs up to this guy who's probably like 6 foot, 350, and just starts screaming at him. She's like, why? Because he's gay. So I just grabbed her. I'm like, Sarah, we're leaving. So just little trouble stuff like that. Nothing seriously, nothing crime, nothing illegal.
Besties in Crime is available where you get your books and ebooks, including Amazon and Barnes & Noble. We'll catch up more with Rob later, but now I think it's time we get into sinister subjects. So I was sent a message that prompted me to want to cover this topic. And this message says, question for your next episode. I know you're not a sports girly, but recently 4 Giants players wrote a Bible quote on their hats as a way to protest Pride Night, a night where LGBTQ plus fans of sports events can have visibility and representation. What are your thoughts on that? Follow-up. Do you think pride is important in sports? Why or why not? Another follow-up. Maybe pride is not the right word. Representation in sports is better. I agree with that one as well. And we're going to give our opinions and answer this in a moment. But Rob, first and foremost, do you like baseball?
Not really, but I like watching them in their uniforms.
Yeah, like I'm always open to the experience of it, like meaning I would go and I'll eat, I'll drink, but as far as the game goes, like I really don't care. So just to kind of get into this really quickly, on June 13th of 2026, the San Francisco Giants held their annual Pride Night. And like a lot of teams do, they had special pride caps with a rainbow-colored SF logo that players were supposed to wear during the game. And most of the team did, which is great. But 4 pitchers decided not to fully participate. Landon Roop, Ryan Walker, and JT Brubaker wore the pride caps but wrote Bible verses on them referencing Genesis 9 and the rainbow as God's covenant. Another player, Sam Henches, did not wear the pride cap and instead wore the standard Giants game cap. Now, here's where things get a little messy. MLB reportedly gave the players a warning afterward, but according to the league, it wasn't because of the religious message itself. The issue was that players aren't supposed to write personal messages on the official uniforms. So what could have been a pretty routine uniform policy situation suddenly exploded into a national political story. Like, you had politicians accusing MLB of discriminating against Christians. The Department of Justice got involved. Fans started arguing online. LGBTQ plus groups in the Bay Area were upset because San Francisco has such deep roots in queer history, and many people felt the organization didn't do enough to support the community during an event that was literally created to celebrate them. Then Giants president of operations, Buster Posey, held a press conference that somehow made things worse. Reporters kept asking about the controversy, and he basically kept saying, "I'll answer baseball questions only." Now, some people, probably on Fox News, feel religious players were unfairly criticized, and others felt a celebration meant to make LGBTQ plus fans feel welcome became centered around people objecting to it. And somehow a baseball game turned into a national argument about religion, inclusion, free speech, and what a rainbow means. And all of a sudden, I am fatigued by straight people again, Rob. Like, I'm just so fucking exhausted.
This whole situation's just a mess because, for starters, it's really disappointing.
Yeah.
In San Francisco, you're living in San Francisco, but have an issue with pride, LGBTQ plus rights. And it's something as simple as a hat. And I understand that maybe they didn't want to wear it, but I feel that putting the Bible verses on it is a very strong response to it and really kind of trying to send a message that way. And it is super frustrating, especially in the year of heated rivalry where we want more, LGBTQ plus representation and acceptance in sports. Yeah. But the bigger thing for me is Pride nights are nice. I know we just had one in Philly and I saw a lot of people went, and it's great to see that those spaces, which are kind of traditionally masculine, bro-y spaces, are trying to make themselves more accepting and inclusive. Well, that's nice. What is the bigger action behind it? Like a rainbow hat, nice to see, but it's not going to change anything. Yeah. Are you donating money? Are you educating players? Are you taking a stand against oppression? So the hat is a frustration, but the bigger thing to me is this just a display that here's our rainbow, and then July 1st, we're going to forget about the gays again? And
the thing that always fascinates me is that Pride nights were created because queer people were told for decades they didn't belong in sports, and to an extent still are being excluded. But then every year the conversation somehow becomes about the people who don't want to participate. Then religion gets thrown into it, but whether you agree or disagree with the players, it's really interesting how the spotlight almost always shifts away from the queer fans the event was originally for. I will say, I never want to force my beliefs and my lifestyle on anyone. Like, I get it. some people aren't for me and I'm not for everyone, but that doesn't change the fact that we all should have access to the same things everyone else has. Like maybe these players opposed to it should have had the option to opt out. Right. Like I don't want anyone celebrating Pride Night if they aren't doing it genuinely, because if I was a part of a team and they had a church night, I fucking wouldn't want to be a part of it. And if the president of operations can't even give a clear answer, then I don't want to see these Pride Nights from any corporation or sports team that isn't going to fully back it up. Like I had this conversation with my last guest about corporations slapping rainbows on their Instagram photos for Pride, just because like I don't want it if it's not genuine. Am I crazy? Like, where do you stand with all of this?
No, I was thinking the same thing. And I think it's just really disappointing and sad because with everything going on, this just hits even harder. We feel even more exhausted. Like, here we go again, another divide, another, tension. Whereas maybe 5-10 years ago, you wouldn't have even thought twice, you'd have Pride Night and there wouldn't be this kind of response.
Exactly.
And I think we do live in this digital age that's getting increasingly tense where people can just throw out sound bites. So you have the Fox News anchor saying whatever they want, or people pushing back online, and it's important to have conversations, but I feel a lot of people are just making noise sometimes. I get that not everybody's going to accept LGBTQ plus people, same-sex marriage, whatever, but just turn the other cheek, look the other way and go about your business. There's a lot of things I don't agree with that unless it's really causing harm. I'm not saying anything. I'm just, fuming on the inside and going about my day.
Exactly. Let's take a break. From the blood-soaked depths of late-night horror comes a collection so shocking, so scandalous, it'll make your wardrobe scream. Want my face on your chest? Or maybe you just want to rep the cult, the logo, the legend, the Scream Society? Don't just listen to the nightmare, wear it, rep it, live it. Get it now before it gets you. Head to scream-society.printify.me and rep Scream Society merch. Welcome to Terrifying But True, the segment where I choose one random true crime, dark history, or paranormal case and do a deep dive on it. However, for this episode, loosely inspired by Rob's book, Besties in Crime, I felt it would be necessary to cover a couple mini cases where best friends or partners commit some of the craziest crimes. So let's get into them.
When the unthinkable becomes reality, we find ourselves questioning everything, as some stories are too terrifying but true.
First up is the case of David Meza and Taylor Langston, a story of a double life that ended in a brutal, calculated murder on a dark highway in Mexico. Now, this story revolves around 51-year-old Jake Marandino, a wealthy retiree from Texas. Now, in 2013, Marandino met 24-year-old David Meza online. Marandino quickly became infatuated with Meza, who was a former gay porn actor and escort, and began funding his entire lifestyle, buying him a truck, a motorcycle, and paying his rent. However, Meza was hiding this massive secret, and that secret was that he was in a long-term relationship with a woman named Taylor Langston, who was actually pregnant with his child. Text messages would later show that Meza and Langston viewed Marandino strictly as a financial target, openly calling him their sugar daddy. So by May 2015, Marandino's infatuation grew to the point that he bought a $300,000 luxury oceanfront condo in Rosarito, Mexico, and named Meza as the sole beneficiary.
I have it now.
Like, what? And just days before his death, while staying at a San Diego hotel, Marandino even drafted a handwritten will on hotel stationery, leaving his entire multi-million-dollar estate to Meza. So, with the inheritance locked in, Meza executed his plan on May 1st, 2015. After opening the condo together, Meza left Merendino at a Mexican hotel, claiming he was riding his motorcycle back to San Diego to visit a sick relative. Meza did cross the US border, but a few hours later, he rode right back into Mexico. He called Merendino from a Mexican phone, lying that his motorcycle had broken down on the highway. Merendino immediately drove out in his Range Rover to rescue Meza. He pulled over at a dark, secluded turnout overlooking a 100-foot ravine, and the moment Merendino stepped out of his car, Meza attacked him with a knife. Now, the attack was incredibly violent and resulted in Merendino's death at the scene. The most severe injuries were to Merendino's neck. Meza slashed his throat so deeply that he nearly decapitated him. Now, investigators found evidence of a struggle and multiple injuries indicating a desperate fight for life. And after killing, Meza moved the body to the nearby ravine to hide the crime before fleeing back across the US border in the early morning hours. And the cover-up began almost immediately. As Meza and Langston attempted to claim the estate using the handwritten will, the cover-up began almost immediately as Meza and Langston attempted to claim the estate using the handwritten will. However, federal investigators dismantled their story through digital forensics. And despite Meza's claim of being in California, phone records and GPS data placed him at the scene of the crime during the time of the murder. Langston attempted to provide a false alibi, but their coordinated text messages revealed the truth. Since the plot originated in the United States, federal prosecutors handled the case, and in 2017, David Meza was convicted of murder and conspiracy, resulting in a life sentence. Taylor Langston pleaded guilty to conspiracy to obstruct justice for her role in the cover-up and served just 21 months in prison. So, in the end, the couple thought they had executed the perfect crime, right? By crossing borders and all of this. But they forgot that in the modern world, your phone will always keep the receipts. See, I knew there was a reason why I had an issue watching gay for pay actors. Like, I do not trust them.
You can't trust anyone. So when you were saying the case, kind of funny how it all connects. That same podcast I was listening to that my friend Sarah and I like, that kind of, was when the idea for the book came together. I had actually, you can submit fan requests to them to request like a theme for the episode. And I did that for porno crimes because one of the crimes they covered has a tie into my hometown area. But I think this was the other case that they covered in it. A few years ago, I was watching, it was Pride. I wanted to watch gay movies. So I saw King Cobra came up, not the actual movie with the snake, the one about the porno company. It said based on a true story. So I started watching it. And then like 10 minutes in, they showed like news footage, and it was the actual local news footage from my local news station that I would watch every morning before school. So I was like, oh my God. Yeah. So that happened like 20, 30 minutes from my hometown area.
This next case, I almost wanted to scrap and just do a full segment on it because it is so out there. This is the murder of Bobby Kent, a case where a toxic suburban friendship turned into this full-on Lord of the Flies style execution. And I do want to say that when I first looked into this, I had a hard time. Because the victim, and I don't want to sound insensitive, but the victim here was not a very good person and did a lot of triggering things to his friends. But just to kind of understand what happened here, Bobby Kent was this muscle-bound 20-year-old who ran his friend group like a mini mob boss, basically. He allegedly spent years brutally bullying, beating, and sexually humiliating his lifelong best friend, Marty Puccio, once even breaking his nose over a minor driving mistake and getting a Doberman to attack him. He financially exploited his friends by forcing them into male stripping and amateur pornography, and would even take cuts of their earnings while dictating their personal lives. But eventually, Bobby started terrifying others in their Florida suburb friend group, including Marty's new girlfriend, Lisa Connolly. Marty terrorized the other women in the social circle through physical abuse, non-consensual sexual acts, and direct threats to murder a former girlfriend and her infant child. Now, Lisa Connolly decided she'd had enough. She rallied a group of 7 of the friends and people close to them and convinced them that Bobby was going to kill them all anyway, so she orchestrated a hit. And on July 14th, 1993, they lured Bobby out to a pitch black, isolated rock pit in the Florida Everglades under the guise of drag racing and breaking into this construction site to throw a party. And once they got deep into the darkness, a couple of the girls tried to distract Bobby, and suddenly Marty Puccio stepped up from behind and drove a knife straight into Bobby's neck. Bobby attempted to defend himself as the situation escalated into this violent confrontation involving several members of the group. And in the chaos that followed, the group used multiple weapons to overpower him, eventually leading to his death. The attack was this frenzied and disorganized event that left Bobby with numerous fatal injuries before his body was left in a nearby canal. So the group believed they had resolved the situation, right? And they were going to get away with it. But they were quickly identified after, because within days, one member of the group confessed during police questioning, leading to the arrest of all 7 individuals. Now, I just want to break it all down here for everyone. So you have Lisa Connolly, who was the primary mastermind who organized the entire plot. She held meetings at her house and recruited outsiders to ensure the murder was carried out. Then you have Marty Puccio, who acted as the primary attacker, stepping up to stab his lifelong best friend in the neck and chest during the initial ambush. Then you have 2 girls by the names of Alice Willis and Heather Swallers, who were part of the friend group and acted as the bait, luring Bobby to the remote rock pit under the guise of this sexual encounter and a drag race, and later pretended to look for a lost earring to distract him right before the attack. Add in Lisa's cousin named Derek, who drove one of the cars to the scene and stood guard as the lookout, and later helped Marty attempt to dispose of the body in the canal. Now, there were 2 other men who were at the scene. Another man by the name of Derek Kaufman, who was a 20-year-old outsider recruited by Lisa because he claimed to be a hitman. He participated heavily in the physical assault at the rock pit to ensure Bobby was dead. And finally, the last member was Donald Semenuk, who was another outsider brought into the loop through his relationship with Allie Willis. He joined the attack alongside Marty and Kaufman, stabbing Bobby during the ambush. Now, after the murder, they all became known as the Broward 7. They faced significant legal repercussions. Marty Puccio was eventually sentenced to life without parole, while the others received sentences ranging from several years to life in prison. But get this. In 1995, the mastermind, Lisa Connolly, was convicted of second-degree murder and conspiracy. And while state sentencing guidelines suggested a term between 7 and 22 years for those charges, the trial judge chose to make an example of her as the mastermind. He handed her a sentence of life in prison plus 5 years. However, her legal team immediately appealed the decision, and in 1998, it was ruled that the life sentence was too harsh and legally unjustified because the evidence did not support a departure from standard guidelines, and her sentence was officially reduced to just 22 years. Imagine that. The mastermind of this whole crime only gets 22 years, while some of the people involved received a life sentence. And I don't know how I feel about this one. Like why not just report and document this friend's disgusting actions?
All around this whole friend group seems a little, I don't know. I'm trying to think of the word. A little sketchy. I don't know.
Exactly.
I think you kind of attract the energy you put out there. And I don't mean that in a victim shaming way, but what he was doing, I don't know. Maybe they had some stuff going on, and then I don't know. I think there's a lot of background if he was doing that and then it led to them retaliating with that whole murder plot.
Like, no one thought killing him would be a little extreme. Like, they could have gone a different route with this. Before we wrap up, Rob, with all my guests, I love to create a game for them. And for you, I've come up with something I like to call Book or Blockbuster. Now, I'm going to throw out a bunch of horror-related scenarios I've made up that are based on popular villains, urban legends, queer culture, and films. And these might be ideas I want to make happen, so whoever's out there listening, I'm just saying. But anywho, you have to decide whether these scenarios are better as a book or a movie, even if they are already one of the two. You can only pick one, and then you've got to tell us why. Is it something that would be scarier when you can see it on screen, or would it work better when readers have to imagine it for themselves? There's no wrong answers, there's no timer, just tell us why. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Amazing. Let's play Book or Blockbuster. The Babysitter and the Man Upstairs.
I think Blockbuster. There could be a lot of, you can kind of feel the tenseness in that situation through like different pan shots of her maybe walking around the house, and kind of like The Strangers, like him just standing behind her. So I think the visual is really what would build the horror in that.
Sleep paralysis.
I think that would be Book, because I think you can go really deep into the emotions and the inner psyche, but you'd have to have the length to have the words, you know, like the pages to write it out, as opposed to, I don't think the same like dread feeling would come through just a movie of watching somebody paralyzed. Or I think you'd have to really read it and be inside their head.
Oh yeah. Demonic possession in a remote cabin.
I think Blockbuster. I think that's another one where it's, you know, the silence of being by yourself, and then all of a sudden like a loud noise or something weird happens. I think the audio would really set in the horror.
A cursed podcast.
Okay, I'm gonna say Blockbuster because I recently, and I cannot remember it for the life of me, but I recently watched a movie where there's a group of friends during the pandemic, and they're on a Zoom call for their friend's birthday, but it turns out she had a fake background up and she gets kidnapped during it. And so they go to her house and she's not there. So I think a podcast could be something fun like that, where it's not a traditional movie. It's like, you know, you see the different video screens as they're recording, or maybe there's sound bites or the microphone picks things up, as opposed to just traditionally character dialogue and a standard, like filming scene.
A queer coven of witches.
I would want that to be a Blockbuster, just because I would want it to be super campy,
Absolutely.
Gay culture. I'd need the outfits, the sass, the attitude, all of it.
Like, I need to see this. A small town killer who dresses up in a black robe with a white mask and phones their victims.
That sounds like it'd be a really good movie. Maybe like called Stab or something.
Right? I think this next one I think is my favorite that I came up with. A homicidal author who writes a novel based on each of his victims.
That I think would be a good book, because you could have like parts, like certain chapters could be excerpts of the books he's writing about, or it could be about the police trying to track him down and they find his manuscripts and are trying to figure out like what's going to happen next. So definitely book.
Going to hell and repeating your 9 to 5 on an endless loop for eternity.
Probably Blockbuster, because I think that could be a really funny, dark horror movie.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like a Ryan Murphy production.
Yeah, but I would need Dolly Parton in it.
These are getting really dumb now. A gay go-go dancer Wolfman.
I think that could be a somewhat hot movie. So I'd say movie. You definitely want the visuals for that. The hair, the dancing, all of it.
A barista pregnant with the Antichrist.
I think that'd have to be a movie, because I think it's one of those ones that's so campy you need the visuals and the sound effects for it.
A killer clown that uses Grindr.
I would just want to see that be a movie. I don't know if it'd be better as a book or a movie, but for myself personally, I'd love to see that as a movie.
You did it. That was great. I love that. Like I said, like I like when I was making some of these up, I was like, some of these are like so good. I really want to see the author.
Yeah.
Who writes about his victims. Like that, wouldn't that be so, like it would just be so cool.
I think there's a lot of different twists that could take.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on and taking time to chat with me. And yeah, but before I let you go, why don't you let everyone know what you have going on and what you have coming up?
So currently, like I said, I'm publishing YouTube videos, a few each week, just turning the old podcast episodes into videos. So we're like 2 to 3 minute bite-sized micro topics. Hoping to be back in the fall with new podcast episodes. And Ralph, I'd love to have you on for another episode soon as I'm back in the recording mood. And awesome. And then on the side, I have been trying to get back into writing a little bit. I started writing something about 2 years ago, but it's been kind of slow moving. Basically, it's this guy who's in a situationship and he decides he wants to try to cast a love spell to make his situationship fall in love with him. But while he does it, he has to break into the house when his situationship guy's out, and he comes back early. So he tries to run and gets hit by a car and dies. And it turns out the love spell he casts wasn't a love spell, but a binding spell. So his spirit is trapped haunting his situationship's house. And there's a lot of bickering and humor. It's supposed to be kind of like a supernatural dark comedy. That you have to kind of work through that so he can be at peace and not be, a vengeful spirit. But I'm only about like 8 chapters into that. May or may not be inspired by real events. Not the death part, but again, a lot of the character dynamics, little stories here and there, there's some real life in it.
Awesome. A big thank you to Rob for coming on and to those who submitted to the podcast. Make sure to get those questions and stories in. Always remember to keep it respectful and honest. Check out the links in bio on the podcast socials and support a homosexual in need by buying some merch. And until next time, I'll scare you all on the next episode.
Thank you for tuning into the Scream Society podcast, hosted, written, produced, and edited by yours truly, Ralph Anthony. Help the society grow by subscribing on your favorite platform and leave a rating and review. I always strive for 5s. Have a horror or paranormal experience? Want me to answer your questions on the show? Submit to beacons.ai/The Scream Society. Connect with the podcast on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Scream Society Podcast. And until next time, I'll scare you on the next episode.